yes. That was what she got first, was a no, but she kept working at it. As I think about stories of Jesus healing people, usually they came and they asked, and he got right at it. He did it right up, fixed them right up. The recorded words suggest that he put his own needs aside and looked after their problem, and then he went back to what he was doing. I was preparing this on Thursday, and Wanda was looking after the grandchildren, so I was home alone. And it was about, 8:45, and the phone rang. And it was Wanda's friend Lisa, and she talked for about 20 minutes, and then my cell phone rang, and it was Crystal, and she wanted to talk, so I had to hang up on one of them, and she talked till after 11. An hour and 47 minutes. I put aside what I was doing so that I could talk to them. Now, this is what Jesus did all the time. So let's review some of those stories that warm our hearts. One was a leper came and fell on his knees before him and asked him for healing. And Jesus had compassion on him, and he reached out and touched the leper, which was just unheard of. And then he said, I am willing, and he healed him. And that's Mark 1:40-42. There was a couple blind men who were calling from the side of the road, and the people shushed them and said, be quiet, and they refused to, and Jesus called them over, and he healed them right away. And that's Matthew 20:30. There was a woman who touched the corner of his garment, and she was happy to be unknown. She was healed immediately, and she didn't want to have any fuss made of her, but Jesus was going to have none of that. He wanted to make sure that he stopped in Matthew 5:25, and he looked for her until he found her, and he let her know that he was happy with her faith. Well, the children came and wanted to have time with him, and he was happy to do that. They sat on his knee, and there was a Roman soldier who asked Jesus to heal his servant, and Jesus said, yes, we'll come right now. And if you remember the rest of the story, he didn't actually have to go. The guy said, you can do it from here. And he praised his faith. And that's Matthew 8:5. Another time, he was very tired, and purposely, with his disciples, headed off in a boat to cross the Sea of Galilee and go to a secluded place. And it turned out when he arrived, it wasn't secluded. There was many thousands of people there. And the scripture says he felt compassion on them, and he didn't send them away. He healed many, and he preached, and then he fed them, the 5,000 men, and the women and children. Only then did he tell them to go, and that was Mark 6:30. There were times when it would have been easier for him to not heal people. If you remember, when it was the Sabbath, they were watching him closely. He had no business healing people, it was work. Well, there was one spot where he was in the temple preaching, and he saw a crippled woman who was bent over double, and been bent over double for 18 years. And she didn't see him or ask to be healed. He saw her, he called her over, and he healed her with those people right there ready to give him a blast. And they did. And that's John 13:11. Well, I thought to myself, well, is there any other stories of miracles that Jesus did where he did delay? And there is one. It was the story of Lazarus. If you remember, he was told, and he stayed around, and by the time he got there, he wanted to make sure, he knew Lazarus was dead, and he wanted to make sure he was well dead. And he'd been in the grave for 4 days. And he said, bring him out. Roll the stone away and bring him out. And they say he will stink. And can you imagine that? People saying, here he is, he's bringing him out, and his clothes stunk of rotting flesh, but he was alive. Well, all of these examples make this story that we just read of Jesus purposely ignoring and disrespecting this woman seem out of place for him. Out of character. He's the good guy. And if you took these words and superimposed them on a politician or a pastor, you'd say, what are you thinking? Why would you say something like that? If he had a political advisor, they would have said, don't say that. Well, it's a good thing he didn't have a political advisor, because it was the right way to deal with this woman. So let's look at this woman trying to save her young daughter from a life of pain and suffering. Number one is, he had something they wanted. And when I say he had something they wanted, everyone wanted to be healed. Everyone had a brother or sister or a daughter. In Mark 7:24, it said, Jesus got up and went away from there to the region of Tyre, and when he had entered the house, he wanted no one to know of it, but he could not escape notice. And after hearing of him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately came and fell at his feet. Because Jesus was human, he had need of rest and downtime like everyone else. He got tired just the same as we do. He was trying his best to have an evening where he didn't have to deal with other people. Out of the public eye, no need to heal people. There's other places where it said that he could no longer go into towns and villages because so many people crowded around him, there was no time for him to even eat. Well, I thought to myself, well, was there a time that he could go to a village and eat and not be interrupted? And the only ones I could think of was when he went to the tax collector's house. He went to Matthew and Zacchaeus' house, and he got to sit down, and there was no one to interrupt him. Well, as the text says, he tried to sneak in unnoticed and have an evening to himself. Now, he was different than most of us. When we get tired and we need rest, we're not kind, but he was. I'm not saying we're always not kind, but there's lots of times where we can be, you've heard that expression, out of sorts. I've been out of sorts myself sometimes. It describes someone who's tired and allows that to impact how they deal with other people. Oh, he's out of sorts today. I know with me, what would make it even worse is if I had planned it and it was all going well and everything is working, and then all of a sudden somebody messed it up. I remember somebody came to me and said, Peter, I need you to fix my car. And it was but the point was, that's not the way Jesus was. She was the person that was causing Jesus the grief, and on top of that, she had no legitimate claim to his time. Most people would chase her out and say, don't let the door hit you on the bottom of the way out. Well, that's not Jesus. But number 2 says no success. Verse 26 says, now the woman was a Gentile of the Phoenician race. She kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. Now we just looked at Jesus' point of view. We looked at it from Jesus' point of view. He was coming to have a quiet evening, and she ruined it. Well, let's look at it from her point of view. She knows that he's the only one that can do this. When we want to get a prescription and or pick something up, and we go to the Shoppers Drug Mart and it's not available, and we go to another drugstore, we get it there. Or we go to a supermarket where there is a drugstore. We have lots of options. She didn't have any other options. Jesus was the only one who could do this for her. And he was the go-to guy, because he cast out demons and he had a proven track record with many happy customers. She could say to Jesus, sorry, I can't go anywhere else. I'm going to ask until my voice is gone. I'm here and they'll have to carry me out. If you want to get rid of me, they're going to have to carry me out. The text says she repeatedly asked him to cast the demon out of her daughter, and he didn't respond. Well, it doesn't say he didn't respond. It just says she kept asking. And when you ask, and the person responds, you don't have to ask again. We don't know what it looks like, but did he sit there and not even look at her? Or did he look at her and not speak? Or did he say no, 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 over and over again? We don't know, but she didn't give up. You know, there's nothing worse than going to there's lots of things worse, but it's not high on my list of good things. It's going to the outpatients, and you go in and you see the triage nurse, and you sit down, and the time goes, and you look at your watch 58 times, and it's been 14 hours, and still they haven't called you. In the last month, there was a woman who went in with a problem with her pregnancy, and they didn't look after her, and the baby died. And there was an old man who sat in the waiting room, and he died. Well, we have a right to be upset. The politicians, the doctors, everyone apologized for all of this that happened. And they were going to do something about it, but we have a right because we're Canadians. But what about if you're from another country? And you have to make special arrangements. You have to have insurance, or they just can't or won't do anything. They won't care for you. Well, I expect as a non-Jew, she didn't have a Medicare card that said, your Jewish prophets will look after me and cast out demons. She didn't have a card that said that. If you remember, Naaman came, and he had a letter from his king to the king of Israel, says, heal my servant. And he tore his robe and said, what's this up to? What's this going to happen? Why is he asking me to do this impossible thing? He wanted use of the country's prophet. Well, I don't think she was high enough status to have any ruler write an official letter to King Herod and say, look, you have a prophet named Jesus, and he can heal. Send him a message of introduction so he'll heal my daughter. This was a last-ditch effort, and she had little hope of success. She didn't figure this is going to be successful. Number 3, success but hard won. Verse 27 said, and he said to her, let the children be satisfied first, for it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now, there's 2 words that are used for dog in the language that Jesus was using, and when this was written. And one is for a pet, a puppy that's and everybody loves, and a mangy, scraggly dog, wild dog in the street. He used the puppy that everyone loves word. So that's what he used. Then she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs. And he said to her, because of this answer, go. The demon has gone out of your daughter. And going back to her house, she found the child lying on the bed, and the demon having left. Well, no was the answer she got, with a good explanation that no one could fault. But at least he was talking to her at this point, and that was a step in the right direction. He was telling her what he knew. She had no business asking a Jew, their sworn enemy for 2,000 years, to set aside his own people and use his limited resources on his daughter. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, and not to insult anybody here, but women in the Bible times were not considered of very high status. They couldn't speak into a trial because they couldn't do this. I was reading Genesis 46 this morning, and it listed the 70 people that went into the promise from wherever they were staying in the promised land to Egypt. 70 people went to Egypt. And it says right there, that doesn't include the wives. They weren't even listed. The wives of Jacob or the wives of his children. In the 70 people. They didn't even list them. They didn't even count them. So, not only were women not very valuable, a young girl would even be less. There's a archaeologist was found a tablet, and people would send messages on clay tablets. And this clay tablet was translated, and it was a husband sending a letter home to his wife. She was pregnant, and it said, if it's a boy, good, look after him. But if it's a girl, expose her. Now, expose her was a short way of saying, we don't want her, take her to the river and leave her there to die. That's the way it was. Not nice, not good. But here was this woman, and not even the father, asking a Jew to save the life of a young girl who were their enemy. Verse 27 is what she would have expected, but it was kinder. She probably had personal experience with Jewish religious leaders, or she knew people who had, and they weren't kind. They had to put up with the Romans because they were under their rule, but they were awful they hated other Gentiles unless they were willing to convert. Well, this wasn't her, or the text would have said so. It doesn't say that she was going to convert. She didn't promise Jesus she'd convert if he saved her daughter. No. It was a bold, brazen request, and he spoke back to her, so she grabbed the gift of a response. At least he's talking to me. That's a step up. Well, so he said, yes, but even, this is what she said to him. Yes, but even the dogs under the table feed on the children's crumbs. She was not offended. She was content with the crumbs because she was a dog, and probably appreciated being referred to a pet instead of the other kind of dog in the street. She was coming. She understood she wasn't a Jew. She understood she wasn't the promised, the people of the promise. She would know this because she lived in this area. Lots of Jews there. Well, sometimes people can say awful things with the comments. Biden was having a speech last week, and he called the people, the Republicans, semi-fascists. So somebody said, oh, don't say that. Well, this was much kinder than this. This is what he said to her. Now, see, she was at least in the house, under the table, a chance for some kindness. And against all odds, she succeeded in getting the miracle she requested. But more than that, we get a recording of it. Now, there was lots of stories of people who were healed. We don't know who they were. It says he healed many people. Who are those many people? Well, we don't have their story. But Jesus wanted to make sure that we heard her story. If you read verse 24, it says Jesus got up and he entered the house, and he wanted to be no one to know it, so he could escape notice. It doesn't sound like there was anybody with him. So he would have had to relay this story to the people who were John and Matthew and Mark and all these people who were going to write it down. You know, most people throughout history are born and live and die without history remembering them at all. The crazy thing is some young men will go and shoot up people in the school and kill people and end up being killed just so that they'll have a place in history. People will remember their name. Now people are saying, if somebody shoots up a school, don't ever say his name. Don't report it on the news. Just have him as a nameless shooter so other people who are going to copy it say, what use is this? No one will know my name. Well, we don't know her name, but we know more about her, what she did, than we know most of the women who are Jewish. If you remember the story I told about the woman who touched the garment, well, a man came and said, save my daughter. And Jesus stopped, and they came to him and said, don't worry, don't bother the master, the child has died. And he goes and he brings Peter and John and James and the mother and father into the house. Well, we don't have anything that says what the mother said. I expect she said thank you, but we don't know that because this is one of the rare events. We got it written down. She's head and shoulders above them. Jesus said, because of your answer, the demon has gone out of your daughter. By the way he phrased it, it seems like if she'd answered some other way, in some prideful way, then she may not have gotten her daughter healed. So what's the conclusion in this? What makes us different from her? How do we warrant a better answer than to be seen as the pet dog under the Jewish table, hoping for crumbs and scraps? Well, this story of this woman was, I looked it up in the Bible, in my other Bible, in the first of Mark, it lists all the miracles. And I counted the miracles and leaving out the ones like the turning water into wine, and there's 27 recorded healings or casting out of demons. She's one of 27 in the 4 Gospels. Pretty rare, right? And it gives us an insight into just how little right we have to claim anything as our deserved blessing. We're the receivers of undeserved blessing, and it should change the way we view salvation. I found out that during the pandemic, during the first of COVID, when they shut everything down, and I could go to work because I was considered essential services, there was no one on the street, but the few cars that were on the street were driving slow. And I said, they're being careful. But I have found that I'm angry with people. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying I should be. I'm saying it's a confession. I'm angry with people. And I said, why are people driving so slow? Why are people not obeying the rules of the road? Why are they stopping 2 car lengths back from the line and they don't activate the light? And we sit there and sit there and sit there. Well, the answer is, Don Arnold said that there's 3,000 new immigrants coming to every year since 2019 to Moncton. You look at the taxi drivers, almost all of them are black. The point is, they don't know their way around, they don't know the rules of the road, and I told Wanda we were driving in Maine. I was happy to drive at 20 miles an hour because I didn't know where the street was and I didn't know anything. It's all like things were moving too fast. That's what it is for them. But I'm still mad, and it's not right for me to be mad. I should be happy. I get to drive. I have a car, and almost every night after night, I get home safe. I drive in the yard, back up into my parking spot, and I'm home safe. I should be grateful. But instead, I get frustrated and resentful. That's something I have to deal with. The sin of pride that says I do better. Well, my friend who called me the other night just to talk because he was just bursting with frustration. He was living in an apartment, and a young couple in their early 20s had moved in, and they played their music too loud. Their 3-year-old child ran up and down the hall at 12 midnight, and the woman would put her clothes in the washer. They had washers and dryers she would put her wash in, and her dry in and put a note, "Don't touch my clothes." And she wouldn't take them out for 2 days. And when somebody did take them out, she screamed at obscenities at them. Well, this was not that woman who came to Jesus. And because of that, she had her child healed and her story recorded as an example for the rest of us. They're all gifts. Life and family and health and freedom and love and parents and air and water and most of all, salvation. We're going to remember that. We're going to do communion. We're going to remember salvation. Don't ever forget that none of it is yours by right or by promise. Except in a roundabout way. Abraham was promised that through the people that his generations, through his seed, the world would be blessed. And so, there it is. We're right on their coattails people. And I, for one, am very grateful that Jesus, who was a Jew, would make room for us as a Gentile to be in his story.